Hey everyone, it's Lisa with Are You My Cousin? And I am so excited to be here today to go live here, whether you're watching me on my Facebook page or you're watching this live stream in the YouTube channel. I am super excited because I have been talking about something for weeks. It's been in the works for months, and today is the day it is alive, which is my new book, 100 Questions for Grandma, is live today on Amazon. So I am so excited. So this is my brand new book, and we're going to talk about grandmoms. We're going to talk about questions. We're going to talk about family history and all that great stuff. I even have, well, maybe a special guest here for you guys to meet in just a moment. So super excited to be here with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to the book here in the chat, so you guys can see that with the link to Amazon. So it'll be there and it is available. I am super excited. So while you're coming in, if you have not met me before, if you just kind of stumbled upon my Facebook page or YouTube channel, I am Lisa Listen. I am the author and creator over at Are You My Cousin? And I really strive to help you guys find your ancestors. I want you to be able to grow those family trees. And most of all, I don't want you to be overwhelmed in the process. I know I was early on, and I want to save you guys from that feeling of just being overwhelmed with all the stories. So today, the new book is out, and I really wanted to ask you guys questions and kind of tell you a bit about why I wrote 100 Questions for Grandma. Now, this is a journal style book, so you can see lots of pretty pages, questions, really kind of short and nothing too crazy as far as prompts, but really in-depth prompts about questions we wish we had maybe asked our grandmothers. I know that I had a lot of questions I would love to have asked both of my grandmothers. I knew both of them. I grew up knowing them. And I'm going to actually introduce you to one of my grandmothers. Let me see if I got that right. There we go. So this is my grandma. This is my special guest. Her name is Anita Carr Talbot. And this is actually her picture from when she was married in 1938. And I just love her hat, don't you? And so I wanted to share this with you. I wanted to introduce you to my special guest here, my grandmother, and share a story with you that she told me late in her life. And I was fortunate enough to interview her when she was well into her 90s, shortly before she passed away. Now, at the time when I was talking with her, I had a 16-year-old, and I was teaching him to drive. And if you've ever had an opportunity to teach your children to drive, you know you know the nervousness and the anxiety that comes with that. They're nervous and anxious, but boy, we're sitting over there in that passenger seat and we're like white knuckling it, right? So my grandmother, she never really liked to drive. I never really thought much about it. And I made an offhand comment about not being able, or the anxiety I was having surrounding teaching my child to drive. And she's like, "Oh, Lisa," she said, "I didn't like to drive either." And the story she related was how she did need to learn to drive because she had to go to town every now and then. So she learned how to drive. She learned on the farm. Her husband and her father-in-law taught her to drive. And she was on her way to take the driver's test. So she was driving herself to the driver's test. And this is back on the time. So, this is, the older cars. You think about the door handles that like protruded from the side of the car. We don't have that as much today, but protruded from the side of the car. Now, somewhere along the way, she apparently sideswiped a fence post or a tree, maybe, but they think it was a fence post and sheared that door handle off, but she did not know it. So she gets to the driver's test and the gentleman comes out to get in the car for her to take her driving test. So he's coming out, the examiner, to get in the car and he can't get in the car. And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "I can't get in the car." And she's like, "Well, use the door handle." I guess there's no door handle. And she gets out and she walks around. And sure enough, there is no door handle. A lot of scratches, but no door handle. So he ended up going in through the driver's side, scooting over. She took her driver's test and she still passed her driver's test, got her license. But in the meantime, the story goes on that she literally sideswiped a fence post on the way to get her driver's test. So we got a good laugh out of it, relieved a lot of stress on my child's part and maybe a little bit on mine, but we had a lot of laughs and a lot of fun with that. So now at that point, so late in her life, I understand why she didn't want to actually drive. So these are just some of the stories that I recognize when I think back over the talking with my grandmothers that I missed. It told me a lot about it told me some about her personality. It told me some of her likes and dislikes. And those are the kinds of stories and the kinds of things I wanted to capture in the book, 100 Questions for Grandmom. It's a chance to be able to ask those questions. So I have a question for those of you watching, and I'd love to know, is there a story, a special story that you wish you had been able to ask your grandmother about? Is there a special event that happened you would like to have asked her? Or perhaps you have a really cool story or tidbit of advice that they shared with you. I'd love to hear about that in the comments. So feel free to pop that in there and let's see what's there. Because I think it's a wonderful way to connect with those older generations. Now, when I wrote the book, it does have 100 questions. It's a guide. You can fill it out yourself. It is also fantastic to be able to take it with you, like if you have young children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, to take it with them and let them use that as a guide to interview that older family member, because sometimes they just need a little prompting. And these are already there. They don't have to sit and be shy and think about it. They actually have it written down for them. And so I think ultimately it's about their ability to be able to connect between generations, whether it's you connecting with a grandchild and they're asking you the questions in the book, or whether it's nieces or nephews, younger children who are going to family reunions. It's a way to kind of break that ice and facilitate that connection that's going on between the generations. Connection is so important, I think, particularly as we've been isolated over the last few years with the pandemic. I think it's a really wonderful way to kind of restart some of those connections and even ask virtually. It can be done virtually as well. So I think that's a really great way for kids to start the conversations and get going. Because if you are interested in researching your family history, or if you have been doing it for a while like I have, you know that it's the connections that really drive it. It's the stories that kind of get you going, especially early on. It's also a great way, if you are a genealogy researcher, you know I love social history, but it's a great way to incorporate family history, social history into your genealogy research. When I talk about social history, it's about the events that were happening around your ancestor, what's happening in their daily lives. So we need to make sure we understand what was happening in their home life. We need to understand what was happening in their community. Maybe we need to understand what was going on with their occupation. Was it an occupation that required them to move? Well, these are stories that we can get and start to understand by asking questions and really connecting with other generations in the family. Because when we understand an ancestor, when we understand the oral history that comes to a family, when we understand the motivations, what we understand their values, the values that drove them to make decisions, then we can start to understand, okay, maybe now I can predict where they migrated to. Maybe I can predict where they went and moved because of their values or their belief systems. So let me show you I was going to share a couple of prompts that come from the book. So each book, I've got good quotes in here too, but so there's plenty of room to write these things down. And if, they don't even have to be full sentences, just quick answers if that's what somebody wants to do, or they can be more in depth. But one of the things would be such as considering traditions in your family. And one of the prompts reads, what did your ancestors, where did they originate, and has your family been there for generations, or are they recent immigrants? And to share any stories around that family's origins. So are there origin stories in the family? You may not know them. You may think that they don't even exist, but have you asked? And did you think to ask? Because when your family tells you the stories, the origin stories of where they came from or when they came from to America or whichever country you might be in, when you're asking about those and you start to hear the traditions that they would have brought with them, you start to understand, oh, that could tell me interesting information about what life was like before they came to America and why they may have gone where they did. Were they pursuing religious freedom? Were they looking for a place where they could practice their faith freely? They probably went to an area that perhaps had others who were practicing that faith as well. So it can help to guide your research in that respect. Maybe they were looking for economics. They moved for economic reasons. Well, look to see what was their occupation. Where might they have gone to be able to do something they already knew, but still make a living? So these are the types of ways to take that oral history and that family tradition that's within your family and then apply it to any family history or genealogy research. Other things would be to kind of explore the values that your ancestors may have had. So one of the prompts is, how did you or the grandmother participate in the community? And were they a member of an organization's board, or did they participate in local politics? Our ancestors were leading really full lives. Yes, they may or may not have been creating records for those lives, but they had causes, they had societies that they would in clubs that they joined. They had things that were close to their heart. And when we can discover, or if we get an idea of what those types of activities were, those types of social organizations were, then we can start to actually find records for those ancestors as well as just tell their story more fully. So for instance, did you have a great grandmother who was a suffragette? Well, then that would be, then you might want to read up on the suffrage movement and understand that that was an important value to her. So you may actually find references to her in a local newspaper. Absolutely. So these are the kinds of things that I think I would encourage you to seek out and ask these questions. I got 98 more in the book for those things. Hey, Flo, it's good to see you again. Yes, you think the book would be good for you to fill out as well for your family. Absolutely. It's the kind of thing that you could get, and I'm sure I will too, fill one out for my own family. And as well as I have others, I actually have family members who are like, I'm going to get that and I'm going to fill it out. I don't have any grandchildren yet, but I'm going to fill it out for my grandchildren to come in the future. So I thought that was a really fun thing to think about. I have others, another woman I talked to, she says, yep, she's a homeschool mom. And she said, this is perfect, because oftentimes in school curricula, whether it's traditional school, whether it's homeschooling, there's usually somewhere in their schooling, they will be children are required to either draw a family tree or write up something about the family history. I know my children both had those things, and I know others have. And this is a great way to do it. And they're like, the kids are like, but I don't want to get on the phone and ask. I don't want to ask, these questions. But when they had something in hand, she was like, this is perfect. We can incorporate this into our homeschool curricula. They can start to, as we talk to grandmom and granddad periodically, once a month or whatever, we can ask a few questions and start to pull those stories out. So I think that was a really good idea, as well as to be able to reach out for those stories, because stories are powerful. We know that stories are incredibly powerful, and they have the ability to connect us with not only to our immediate family, but also to past and future generations. And I think many of us as genealogy researchers, that's what we're here for. That's what we do. It's a value that we have. And so that's why we do genealogy and family history research as well. So that is what I wanted to share with you guys. I couldn't be more excited, guys. It's been months in the making. It's been just so sitting on pins and needles waiting for it to come out and be able to share it with you guys. I know I've been sharing with it and showing it, but it is available live on Amazon. So I would love for you guys to grab a copy of it so that you can also start documenting your own family or giving it out. It'd be great for Christmas gifts. Give it to your grandchildren, give it to, your nieces and nephews so they can interview their grandmothers as well and be able to document that family history. Okay, so I've put that link back in the chat once more in case it had dropped too far down with that. So does anybody have like a story? Were you able to interview some of your older generations before they passed away, or been able to dig into some of the family stories that were there? Let me know in the comments if you have. I know that when I talk with people about research and genealogy and getting started with genealogy, oftentimes people are very focused on the records per se, as we should be. We are focused on records, the birth, marriage, death records, the lands, the tax records, the census records, all of those things. But if we remember the very first step in genealogy research is actually not birth, marriage, and death records. It's oral history. It's knowing what is already known in the family and learning about the family. And because if we fail to ask, eventually we have no one left to ask. And those types of questions and answers are not going to be available to us anymore. So that is actually the first part of family history. It's also sometimes when, as genealogists, we could talk about genealogy all day. You get that. You know, you're my people. You get that. We can talk about genealogy and ancestors and research strategies all day long. I could talk about social history all day long. But you try doing that with your kids. I don't care whether they're little, whether they're, in high school, they could be young adults, and they kind of get that glazed look on their eyes, right? Exactly. Mine do. Mine still do. Mine are adult children. But when you can help them make that connection a little more by having the answers to the questions, by telling the stories of my grandmother learning to drive and actually taking off sideswiping a fence post on the way to take that driver's test, that made a connection. That I saw the spark in my child's eyes, my teenager's eyes, when she told that story and shared that story. We still get a laugh over it today, and it happened many, many years ago. So I would encourage you guys to sit back and think about it. Fill it out for yourself. Fill it out for your future grandchildren, and then again, gift it to a child or a young adult, because I don't want them to miss out. I want to make sure that they are not missing out on exploring family history and stories, because we're just so busy in the world. All right, guys, that's really all I have for you. Thank you so, so much for your support. It always means the world to me when you guys show up here in the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. I truly appreciate your support. And if you happen to think about it and want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that little subscribe button down in the bottom right-hand corner, and that way you'll know when I come live each time. So you guys go have a great day. Start exploring that family history. Bye, guys.